Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really going to pack something interesting. Imagine having a superpowered map, right? Not just for directions, but for, well, everything a local government does. Planning cities, managing resources, even, emergency response. That's basically what Geospatial Information Infrastructure, or GII, is all about. And we're diving deep into this really fascinating study from Indonesia today. It looks at how a global framework, the UN Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, that's UN-IGIF, how it can be tailored to build these powerful GIIs for local governments specifically.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is how GII itself has evolved. It started out as Spatial Data Infrastructure, SDI, way back in the 1990s. And the core idea was simple but powerful. Create once, use many times. I mean, just think about how incredibly costly and time-consuming it is to collect and process complex geographic data. GII is basically the necessary facility, the infrastructure to make that data available and, crucially, shareable among agencies. It avoids all that duplication of effort and really maximizes the value you get from the data.
Right, and Indonesia's been quite ahead of the curve here. They started their national SDI development, Cygnus, back in 1993. Then they officially transformed it into GII with Law Number 4 in 2011. And that law also led to the Geospatial Information Agency, BEG, which manages their national geoportal, INA geoportal. Quite impressive.
It is, but it also raises a really important question. If GII is so vital, why do we still see these, challenges in implementation? The source material tells us that even by 2024, out of something like 623 central and local government agencies in Indonesia, only 441 actually have geoportals connected to that national system. So that gap really highlights the ongoing need for, robust infrastructure.
Okay, so where does a global framework like the UN-IGIF fit into all this? It's developed by the UN and the World Bank, aiming to strengthen geospatial information management, especially for developing countries, right? And to support the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. It's guided by these 9 strategic pathways. Let's see if I remember them all. Governance and institutions, policy and legal, financial, data, innovation, standards, partnerships, capacity and education, and communication and engagement. Phew.
Exactly. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, the UN-IGIF was really designed for national level implementation. So the core challenge for this study, the thing they really dug into, was figuring out how to adapt it effectively for local governments in Indonesia, considering their unique contexts. Plus, the UN-IGIF explicitly adds elements like financial partnerships and communication and engagement things that weren't always, let's say, front and center in Indonesia's earlier GII elements. It's really about taking this broad framework and making it work on the ground, where the rubber meets the road.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. How did this study actually figure out the best way to adapt UN-IGIF for these Indonesian local governments? What was the methodology?
Well, they used a two-pronged approach, pretty solid. First, they sent out questionnaires, distributed them to 426 local government employees. They got 103 responses back, which came from individuals across 9 provincial, 27 regency, and 14 city governments. These questionnaires used a Likert scale, rate the importance to gauge how critical people thought the indicators within those 9 UN-IGIF pathways were for GII development. Now, it's worth noting the response rate was 24.2%. That might introduce some non-response bias, meaning the folks who responded might be different from those who didn't. Something to keep in mind.
Okay, questionnaires first. And the second prong.
Second, they did structured interviews. They talked to 12 local government officials.
But these weren't just any officials, right? They were finalists for the 2024 Bumandala Award for GII, which suggests the GII status was already, pretty good, above average.
Precisely. And that selection introduces a bit of a positive bias. On the one hand, it gave them fantastic insights into the experiences and best practices of high-performing local governments, really valuable stuff. But on the other hand, it does mean the findings might not fully capture the struggles faced by less developed local governments, those with maybe more limited resources. So while we can definitely learn a lot, we need to be a bit cautious when applying these findings to all contexts.
Right, context is key. So, okay, let's get to the findings. What did the study find out about which of those 9 UN-IGIF strategic pathways really truly make a difference for local GII development?
Okay, this is where the questionnaire data, crunched using partial least squares structural equation modeling, PLS-SEM, it's a statistical technique, revealed something crucial. Only 3 of the 9 strategic pathways showed a statistically significant and positive impact on GII development. Just 3. Number 1, with the highest impact path coefficient 0.467 was governance and institutions, SP1. And the key thing here, having a management board or a steering council that oversees the Regional Geospatial Information Network, the RGIN, in local governments, that was highly impactful. Number 2, data, SP4. Path coefficient 0.343. A really important indicator here was simply the availability of geospatial information lists produced by each local government agency, knowing what data basically. And third, capacity and education, SP8. Path coefficient 0.322. Here, the availability of human resources, people actually skilled in the geospatial field within each local government agency, that was a particularly strong factor.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it really boils down to getting the right people involved, managing the data well, and having strong oversight. Those seem to be the core drivers. But hang on, what about the other 6 pathways? Policy, financial, innovation, standards, partnerships, communication. They didn't show a direct statistical impact.
That's exactly right. The analysis showed those remaining 6, policy and legal, financial, innovation, standards, partnerships, and communication and engagement, did not have a statistically significant direct effect, at least not in this Indonesian local government context. Now, this really highlights something important. While the UN-IGIF is comprehensive, maybe even exhaustive, its components might not all apply equally or have the same immediate punch across different local settings. It strongly suggests that, policy and resource allocation should probably prioritize those 3 pathways that did show a clear impact. Get the most bang for your buck, so to speak.
That makes perfect sense. Focus efforts where they demonstrably count the most. Okay, so that's the quantitative side. Now let's shift to the interviews. What did those high-performing local governments reveal about their actual on-the-ground GII conditions and the challenges they're grappling with?
Right. So all 12 of these interviewed local governments had developed the 5 core GII elements we typically talk about: policies, institutions, technology, standards, and human resources. They had the basics in place. When it came to policies, some, like DKI Jakarta province, had actually integrated their local RGIN implementation with the bigger One Data Indonesia initiative, very joined-up thinking. Others, like Bandung City, had separate regulations, but they were designed to be mutually supportive.
Okay, policies were there in some form. And technology.
Yep, all of them had geoportals, and crucially, these were connected to the national INA geoportal. They were using a mix of software, both open source and commercial tools, for their geospatial information work. However, while they were all working on implementing standards, which is Pathway 6, remember many, like East Java Province, for example, admitted they were still in the pretty early stages, sort of just getting acquainted with the standards, figuring them out.
So they're doing it, but maybe not optimally yet. It's a work in progress. What about human resources? That came up as one of the big 3 statistically significant pathways. What did the interviews show there?
Ah, yes. This was a major theme. The lack of available human resources and the real need for better staff skills through training that was the most common obstacle mentioned across these local governments, even the high-performing ones. Many also said they relied heavily on contract-based personnel, and that naturally raises concerns about, work continuity and retaining expertise long-term. Beyond HR, the 2 other big obstacles that kept coming up were challenges in institutional arrangements specifically, a lack of clarity about roles and functions across different agencies involved in the RGIN implementation, who does what, basically, and the other was the suboptimal implementation of those standards we just mentioned.
Okay, so even the leaders face significant hurdles, especially around people, clarity of roles and standards. Knowing these challenges, what did these local governments expect from the UN-IGIF framework itself? What were they hoping it could do for them?
Oh, they had high expectations. All 12 felt UNI could really help optimize their GII development. And interestingly, even though the questionnaire didn't show direct statistical significance for some pathways, the interviews really highlighted their indirect benefits. This is quite nuanced. For instance, they saw communication and engagement, SP9, as absolutely crucial for fostering collaboration among all the different stakeholders, getting everyone talking. And partnerships, SP7, were seen as vital for expanding cooperation, especially for getting hold of human resources and infrastructure things that are often really hard for one local government to develop all by itself. They also expected governance and institutions, SP1, especially strong leadership, to significantly boost awareness about how critical geospatial information is for supporting all sorts of government activities.
Right, so some pathways might not have a direct statistical link in the model, but they're still seen as essential enablers on the ground. That makes sense. This brings us to a really practical point. If we know what's important, statistically or anecdotally, how do we actually translate that into action? And that's where this logic model they developed comes in, isn't it?
Precisely. A logic model is, well, it's a fantastic tool. It systematically visualizes the whole chain, how the resources you have available lead to the activities you plan, which then produce outputs, achieve certain outcomes, and ultimately create the desired impact you're aiming for. And for this study, the proposed impact is pretty clear. Optimizing and effectively implementing geospatial information, which lines up perfectly with Indonesia's Government Regulation 45 from 2021.
Okay, impact is optimized GII. What about the outcomes? What steps lead to that impact?
Based on those interview findings, the key challenges they identified, the proposed outcomes are essentially fixing those problems. So, improving institutional arrangements, implementing standards more effectively, and critically, fulfilling the human resource needs for GII development.
Makes sense. Address the main obstacles. So what activities did they map out in the model to actually achieve those outcomes?
They identified 7 key activities drawn directly from those discussions. 1, conduct regular interagency coordination forums, getting people together. 2, organize dissemination programs to really highlight why implementing geospatial standards is so important and beneficial, spreading the word. 3, develop practical technical guidelines like standard operating procedures, SOPs, for implementing geospatial information, making it easier to do right. 4, conduct a proper human resource needs analysis. Figure out what skills are actually needed. 5, do a workload analysis. Understand how much work there is and how many people are needed. 6, recruit civil servants who actually have a background in geospatial disciplines. Get the right qualifications in the door. And 7, provide ongoing training and capacity building for existing human resources. Keep skills sharp.
That's a very concrete list. And the resources needed to fuel all these activities, where do they come from in the model?
The resources map really nicely back to those UN-IGIF pathways we discussed. You've got the ones that were statistically significant from the questionnaires, governance and institutions, SP1, data, SP4, and capacity and education, SP8. Those are foundational. Then, pulling from the interview insights, they added partnerships, SP7, and communication and engagement, SP9, because they were seen as crucial enablers. And standards, SP6, are also included as a key resource, partly because they're so closely tied to the data pathway and just fundamental to making GII work properly.
What I find really fascinating and incredibly practical is that the study didn't just stop there. It actually classified the local governments based on their specific problems to offer tailored solutions. Can you give us an example of how that worked?
Absolutely. It's a really clever application. They grouped the 12 interviewed local governments into 5 different classes based on their main obstacles. So take class 1. This included places like Lampung Province, South Sumatra Province, Palembang City, and Bantul Regency. Their primary issue, the main thing holding them back, was a lack of human resource availability and capacity, just not enough skilled people. And this was made worse because they hadn't even done the basic homework. No job requirement analysis, no workload analysis had been conducted.
Okay. So for that specific group, class 1, their tailored logic model would naturally prioritize activities like, well, first doing those analyses, then recruiting civil servants, and providing comprehensive training.
Exactly. Address the foundational gaps first, but then look at Class 2, which included, say, Central Java Province and DKI Jakarta Province. They faced similar HR issues, still needed more people and skills, but they had already done those analyses. They knew what they needed. So their tailored logic model could jump straight into activities like recruitment and more targeted training. No need to repeat the analysis step. Or Class 3, like East Java Province. Their main struggle was less about initial HR analysis and more about implementing standards effectively and boosting existing HR capacity. So their logic model would focus heavily on things like standards dissemination, developing those technical guidelines or SOPs, and focus staff training. And this tailored approach gets even more specific using smart criteria-specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-related, allowing each local government to tackle its unique set of challenges in a really focused way.
That's genuinely practical. It moves beyond a generic framework to provide actionable, context-specific guidance.
Really impressive. Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. What does this all mean for us, for you listening, in the bigger picture? This deep dive really shows us quite powerfully that the UN-IGIF, even though it was designed with nations in mind, is actually highly adaptable. It can work for local governments, certainly in Indonesia, as they build out their critical geospatial information infrastructure.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway, the really crucial point, is that while the entire framework is valuable conceptually, certain pathways really are the direct game changers at the local level. Those are governance and institutions, data and capacity and education. The stats bear that out. But just as importantly, we heard from the interviews how other pathways like standards, partnerships, and communication and engagement provide these vital indirect benefits. They foster the collaboration and awareness needed for the whole system to thrive. Absolutely, and this study provides that crystal clear logic model. It's like a strategic roadmap, isn't it, for optimizing GII development by smartly mobilizing resources to tackle the specific challenges that have been identified on the ground. It's a really powerful tool for moving from just talking about GII to actually planning and implementing it effectively.
It is, but it also leaves us with a really important question, something for you, the listener, to perhaps mull over. Given that this model and the insights driving it were primarily shaped by the experiences of higher performing local governments, what specific practical strategies do you think less advanced local governments, maybe in Indonesia, maybe in any country, could implement? Strategies perhaps beyond what we discussed, to overcome their unique, maybe more severe resource limitations and really accelerate their GII development. How can we make sure that the profound benefits of geospatial information, this powerful way of understanding our world, truly reach every community, regardless of their starting point or current capacity?
That's a great question to ponder. We've definitely seen today how vital it is to tailor these global frameworks to local realities, and how crucial collaboration is between national agencies, academic institutions, local governments themselves, maybe peer networks for sharing expertise, technology, and just, well, lessons learned. Ultimately, it's all about building that strong GII groundwork piece by piece, step by step, because that leads to more informed decisions, better planning, and ultimately better governance for everyone.